Our college football preview. We started with the SEC. Now we're looking at teams in the top 25. And Grace Raynor joins us right now. Covers the Clemson Tigers for The Athletic. Clemson has wrapped up its camp portion of practice leading into the season, and I suppose now turns its full attention to the Georgia Bulldogs. Grace, thanks for a little bit of your time this afternoon. Is that kind of the plan now with 2 weeks remaining? They go into full game prep mode, or is there a little bit of in-between time first?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. It's a little bit of both. They started opponent work today, actually, and they're going to do that through Wednesday, and then Clemson will get fully into Georgia Thursday, Friday, Saturday, in addition to an entire week of game prep next week. So certainly starting early on this one. We all know why. But, yeah, camp is over, and it's time to officially turn the page to Clemson, Georgia.
I know Dabo would hate this idea, but I think for most of the rest of us, or at least outside of the Clemson fan base, we look at this schedule, and there's no North Carolina on it in the regular season. It feels like it's a one-game schedule. Can they get past Georgia in the opener and then coast the rest of the way? Tell me why that's a terrible way to look at this.
I mean, especially if you're not a Clemson fan, I think that's how a lot of the country views Clemson's schedule, is that because they dominate so much in the ACC and they're just crushing people, and they really do cruise through it, with the rare exception of, maybe a struggle against Syracuse a couple of years ago, or they come down to the wire with North Carolina. But you're right. I mean, this is there is no close second on Clemson's schedule, and there won't be until they presumably get to that ACC championship game. So I can understand why the rest of the country is going to be locked in on Clemson week 1, and then maybe not again until, week 13.
Within the confines, though, of the ACC, when you look at this schedule this year, are there potential stumbling blocks? I mean, a week 3 game against Georgia Tech. We know Georgia Tech's not there yet, but they're making strides. An NC State team that I think there's a lot of wait and see about, and that's just kind of in the first month of the season. So when you look at the schedule, are there two or three games that you kind of circle and go, this one may be more difficult than at least it looks at the outset?
Yeah, I think I would circle probably Clemson at NC State in week 3, and then immediately the week after Clemson gets Boston College. And I think that, you look at the Atlantic Division, and most people think that NC State is kind of that number 2 team behind Clemson, and crazy, sometimes dramatic things happen when these 2 teams play each other. I've learned my lesson to not count anything out when Clemson and NC State get together. And then Boston College, I think that Phil Dracovic is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the league. I think they're building. They showed us what they could be in year 1 with a new staff and a pandemic and a new transfer quarterback. So I don't say that to say that I think Clemson will have any issues against either of those 2 teams. I think that they'll be fine and take care of business like we've seen them do every year. But I think if I'm, a little more intrigued by maybe some matchups that we've got our eye on, I would say those 2, NC State and Boston College.
I think you're the second person in a week and a half that has warned us about Boston College. We were talking with Missouri's radio play-by-play announcer, Mike Kelly, I think it was a week ago Friday, and he said, this is not a Boston College team that you can look at or can look past, and he pointed to the exact same thing you did, said quarterback play there is going to be really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw what they did in year 1, and I think that they exceeded expectations in Hafley's first year, and now Phil is back and has a command of this offense and is experienced. And, of course, I think it's going to be a building process like every new job is. But, yeah, I think they're going to make more noise than people think they will.
Fair or foul? I don't even know if pressure is the right way. Maybe the expectations that are being placed on DJ Uiagalelei, given the fact that Trevor Lawrence was kind of like the most talked about high school quarterback coming in that was like projected to be a first rounder, maybe the number 1 overall pick since he was in, 10th or 11th grade. Maybe a once in a generation talent, and yet everybody looks at it and goes, yeah, they don't miss a beat at quarterback. Is that fair or foul?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair based on a couple of things. Number one, obviously the sample size is very small, but we have seen what DJ can do, and we did see it on a pretty large stage when he took Clemson to Notre Dame. Granted, they lost, but still, he throws for 439 yards and sets a record for most passing yards ever against Notre Dame. I think that was a pretty significant statistic. And the joke at Clemson these days is that they are signing quote unquote generational quarterbacks, but it's something that's happening basically almost every 2 years at this point.
Yeah.
DJ certainly has the arm, he has the history, he has elite high school competition he's coming from, he has the poise, he seems to be handling Clemson's system really well. They really like his mentality. They talk about him in that way, in the exact same way that they did with Trevor. So yeah, I mean, I think that we will probably unfairly compare DJ's every move to Trevor. I think they're different quarterbacks, but in terms of being successful and the effectiveness of the two of them, yeah, I think that Clemson has to feel great about where they are.
Visiting with Grace Raynor from The Athletic. She covers the Clemson Tigers. They are everybody's number 1 or 2 or 3 or maybe 4 team going into this season. Grace, kind of a big picture question. And I know it starts with quarterback play. So Taj to Deshaun to Trevor to DJ now. I get that. But on a bigger picture scale, how has this happened the way that it has happened at Clemson? Because Clemson was just kind of puttering along as a football program until they weren't.
Sure. I think there's two things that you have to point to that you can tangibly say, okay, these two things have been absolutely crucial in Clemson's long-term success. The first is recruiting. Dabo was an elite recruiter as an assistant coach. He has really good recruiters on his staff. I think it's been significant that he hired Todd Bates from Jacksonville State to come in and continue this D-line recruiting, get some of these guys out of Alabama. That's Todd Bates' area. So I think recruiting is number one and the most important. But then the second thing I would say is just retaining his staff. I mean, Brent Venables and Tony Elliott are back again, and they're both making more than $2 million, and so Clemson is really committed to them in that way. But I just think that the staff continuity that Dabo has had has been really unique and really rare in college football, and you're seeing how it's really paid dividends for the Tigers.
And once you get it to a certain level, if you keep the coaching staff in play and there's no scandal or no NCAA derailment or whatever, it seems like, I mean, easy's not the word, but you are able to maintain. We see that with Alabama. I feel like we're seeing that now with Georgia. Maybe that's happening at Texas A&M with Jimbo, and certainly has and is happening at Clemson. Is there anything that could be a stumbling block in the foreseeable future for Clemson?
I think we all have our eye on, when Tony Elliott, if he takes a head coaching job. I think that's something that we're all kind of intrigued by. And he's talked about being interested in a head coaching gig that is different than the way that Brent Venables talks about it. So I do think that will be interesting. I think Clemson will have a plan in place for that. But, outside of that, they as long as they keep signing their quarterbacks of the future, which they have in Cade Klubnik, they're going to be in the mix for Arch Manning. They did with DJ. They did with Trevor. You can always continue to build around that. I think that their offensive line recruiting needs to get a little bit better, and they are turning a corner in that regard. But, yeah, it's hard to make an argument for how this Clemson program is not built for the long haul. It just seems like Dabo had this vision and carried everything out to make it possible, and it's hard to see kind of what would throw a major monkey wrench in it at this point.
Grace, last thing for you, about a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes left. When you look at this game one matchup where the stakes are so incredibly high and the drama is going to be high, and it's Georgia Clemson, it's what we've talked about all off season long, it's what all of the college football world has talked about. What stands out for you in this matchup? What's the determining factor in the way this game plays out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably a cop-out, but I think my obvious answer is DJ. We've seen him on this stage, but this is now firmly his team, and, can he go get it done in the first top 5 season opener of Dabo Swinney's career in a neutral site? So I think that's a big part of it. But I'm also just interested to see kind of what it looks like up front. Clemson's defensive line, by all means, is supposed to be as good, if not better, than this 2018 group that came through with Christian Wilkins and Dexter Lawrence and Cleveland Farrell, Austin Bryant. I mean, those guys, we all saw all the things that they went on to do. They led Clemson to another national title. So that's the other thing for me is this defensive line as good as we think it's going to be? What does that look like? And how much can Clemson, I don't want to say ride their defensive line to the playoff again, but how much more effective are they at manufacturing pressure and getting back to the Clemson defenses that we've seen in the past that have won championships?
Great stuff. That's Grace Raynor from The Athletic, covers Clemson. Recently won the Edward Aschoff Rising Star Award for relatively young reporters. Congratulations on that, Grace, and thanks so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it, and y'all have a good one. Thanks for having me.
That's Grace Raynor on the Farm Bureau phone line.